This is a huge scandal. I think Labour are covering up Britain's migrant crime wave. The government is trying to prevent the publication of data revealing the full scale of foreign offending in England and Wales from 2018 to 2024. Why? Well, why could that possibly be? I mean, there's only one reason, isn't there? The true stats on migrant crimes must be absolutely awful. I mean, you know the worst bit? Labour's Justice Minister Alex Norris and Prime Minister Andy Burnham could end up using taxpayers' money to go through the courts to block British taxpayers from knowing about how many immigrants have committed crimes in their own country. I mean, this is treacherous stuff to me. Now, 11 families of victims of crimes carried out by migrants have written to the Justice Secretary demanding that he ends this cover-up. They include the family of Rhiannon White, who was stabbed to death by a Sudanese illegal immigrant who stalked her after a shift at a migrant hotel. He then danced as police and ambulance crews failed to save her life. This is like the Pakistani rape gang cover-up all over again. This is like the Afghan resettlement scheme all over again, where successive governments went to court to prevent us from knowing that they'd secretly imported thousands of Afghans, some of whom went on to commit sex crimes. This is like the secret government nudge unit that has been accused of trying to nobble families of victims of migrant crime into giving statements saying things like, "Oh, we don't want our child's murder to be used to stoke division," or "we need to be a kind and inclusive society." I mean, how dare Labour hide the truth about migrant crimes from us? How dare they when they're about to move thousands of illegals into the British countryside? How dare they when they're moving tens of thousands of illegals into HMOs on streets all over the country? How dare they when we can all see it with our own eyes?
Good evening. What is the government afraid the British public might discover? That is the question now hanging over a furious row about migrant crime statistics after claims that the government is resisting the publication of detailed data showing offending by foreign nationals in England and Wales. And if the figures are completely harmless, then surely there is a very simple solution. Publish them. Let the public see the numbers. Let journalists examine them. Let researchers analyse them, and let politicians argue about what they actually mean. But instead, according to the argument made in this explosive debate, the issue has become tangled up in legal proceedings, accusations of secrecy and growing anger from families who say they deserve answers. GB News presenter Patrick Christys certainly had no intention of keeping his criticism quiet. He accused Labour of hiding the truth and questioned why taxpayers' money could potentially be spent fighting the release of information about foreign offending. But there is a crucial question here. Is this really a cover-up, or is the government concerned that releasing incomplete or poorly contextualised statistics could inflame tensions and make an already divisive issue even more dangerous? That is where this story becomes far more complicated. Because behind the political shouting is a serious issue that affects public trust. People want to know whether immigration policy is connected to crime. They want accurate statistics. They want to know whether offenders who are not British citizens are being properly prosecuted and, where legally appropriate, deported. And above all, they want to know whether governments are telling them the truth. Christys argued that detailed information covering foreign offending between 2018 and 2024 has not been made available in the form he wants. He pointed to figures that are already public, including data concerning sexual offences, while questioning why more detailed offence-by-offence information has not been released. His argument was blunt. If the government has nothing to hide, why not publish the complete data set? That argument was strengthened by the presence of families of victims. According to the programme, 11 families affected by crimes allegedly committed by migrants have written to the Justice Secretary demanding greater transparency. For families who have lost loved ones, this is not an abstract political debate. It is about whether the state has learned lessons from individual tragedies. And that is why statistics matter. But statistics also need context. One of the most important distinctions in this debate is the difference between nationality, immigration status, country of birth and ethnicity. They are not interchangeable. Nor does a statistic showing that foreign nationals are overrepresented in one category of offending automatically prove that immigration itself causes crime. That is precisely why comprehensive data matters. Without reliable information, politicians can make sweeping claims. Without context, opponents can manipulate individual figures. And without transparency, the public is left wondering what they are not being told. That is the trust problem at the centre of this entire controversy. The debate became even more heated when Christys highlighted several horrific criminal cases involving foreign nationals. One case discussed on the programme involved a Sudanese national, Ibrahim al-Bashir, who was sentenced to 25 years in prison and given an indefinite hospital order after a violent stabbing attack. The case, as described during the broadcast, raised questions about previous contact with authorities and whether more could have been done before the attack. Those questions are legitimate. Whenever someone commits a serious crime after previously coming to the attention of authorities, the public naturally asks whether warning signs were missed. But it is also important not to turn individual criminal cases into proof of a broader conclusion without examining the evidence. That distinction is essential. Because Britain does have a crime problem, Britain also has an immigration problem, and Britain has a public confidence problem. But these are not necessarily the same thing. The most explosive part of the discussion came when the panel turned to the argument that migrant crime statistics could fuel social unrest. One panellist suggested that releasing controversial figures without sufficient context could inflame vigilantes and racial tensions. Christys pushed back aggressively. His response was essentially this: if the numbers are available, the public should be trusted enough to see them. And that is a powerful democratic argument. Governments cannot simply decide that citizens are incapable of handling uncomfortable information. But there is another side. Governments also have a responsibility not to release misleading information or allow statistics to be interpreted in ways that the underlying data cannot support. That is why transparency and context should go together. Publish the data, explain the methodology, show the denominator, show the population differences, separate asylum seekers, legal migrants, foreign nationals and people born overseas. Show conviction rates, show offence categories, show age and sex distributions where appropriate, and allow independent experts to examine the results. That would be far more useful than politicians simply shouting across television studios. Because there was another revealing moment in this debate, the panel discussed the fact that the overwhelming majority of crimes are committed by British nationals. That point matters. If foreign nationals account for a particular proportion of offences, it does not follow that British nationals are responsible for only a small part of Britain's crime problem. The domestic crime problem remains enormous. Violence against women, domestic abuse, sexual offences, knife crime, organised crime, child exploitation. These issues cannot simply disappear from the national conversation because immigration is controversial. At the same time, acknowledging that most crime is committed by British nationals should not become an excuse for ignoring crimes committed by foreign nationals. Both things can be true. The government can tackle domestic crime while also dealing with offenders who are foreign nationals. And that brings us to deportation. One of the strongest arguments made during the debate was that Britain already has immigration rules under which certain foreign nationals who commit serious crimes can face removal subject to the law and individual circumstances. So the real question is not simply, are foreign criminals being allowed to stay? It is, how often are they being removed? How long does the process take? And what legal barriers prevent removal? Those are measurable questions, and the public deserves measurable answers. The government, for its part, rejected the accusation of a cover-up. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said protecting the public is its priority and pointed to funding for victim support services. The government also declined to comment on live legal proceedings. That response is important because the existence of legal proceedings does not automatically prove that ministers are trying to hide information. There can be legitimate legal reasons why data cannot simply be released immediately. But that does not mean the public should stop asking questions. In fact, it makes transparency even more important once the legal process allows it. Because if the government eventually releases comprehensive figures, the debate can move away from speculation. If the numbers are less dramatic than critics predict, ministers can say so. If the numbers reveal serious problems, then policymakers can respond. Either way, facts are better than rumours. And that is perhaps the biggest lesson from this extraordinary argument. The public does not need politicians to tell them what conclusion to reach. They need the evidence. They need the raw numbers. They need the methodology, and they need enough information to make their own judgment. The danger is that every side of this debate has an incentive to cherry pick. One side can highlight shocking individual crimes and imply they represent the entire migrant population. The other can highlight the majority of crimes committed by British nationals and imply that foreign offending is therefore insignificant. Neither approach is good enough. The truth is almost certainly more complicated. Some migrants commit crimes, most migrants do not. Some nationalities or demographic groups may be overrepresented in particular crime categories. That requires investigation rather than slogans. And British nationals commit the majority of offences overall, which means Britain cannot solve its crime problem simply by changing immigration policy. These realities can coexist. So where does that leave us? Back where we started, with a simple demand: show us the data. Not edited highlights, not political talking points, not carefully selected statistics, the complete, properly explained evidence. Because if the government genuinely believes its policies are working, detailed data should help ministers prove it. And if critics are wrong about the scale of the problem, comprehensive statistics would give the government the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that. But if the figures reveal serious failures, then the public has a right to know that too. This is not simply about immigration. It is about accountability. It is about victims. It is about crime. And ultimately, it is about whether ordinary people can trust their government when it tells them what is happening in their own country. Before we continue, I have one small request. If you're enjoying this deep dive into British politics, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Briefed. Believe it or not, over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. It's completely free and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Now, the argument made by Patrick Christys was deliberately provocative. Prove me wrong was essentially his challenge, and that may actually be the most reasonable way to approach this entire controversy. Don't ask the public to blindly believe one side. Don't ask them to blindly believe the other. Release the evidence. Let independent experts scrutinise it. Let Parliament debate it. Let journalists investigate it, and then let the facts speak. Because in a democracy, uncomfortable information does not become less important simply because it might make people angry. And equally, statistics do not become proof of a political argument simply because they appear shocking. Britain needs something much more valuable than outrage. It needs facts. It needs transparency. And it needs a government confident enough in its own position to put the evidence on the table. Until that happens, the argument over migrant crime statistics will continue. And every time another shocking case appears, the same question will return. What exactly do the numbers show? And why hasn't the public been allowed to see the full picture? That is the question Labour now faces. And whether you agree with Patrick Christys or not, it is a question that deserves a clear answer.